It all started with a flag. Just a simple piece of fabric, a few feet of colored cloth. But for one family, in what they thought was their forever home, flying that flag kicked off a legal war that would send tremors through the very foundation of homeowners associations across America. A war that would end up clarifying the rights of nearly 80 million people. Imagine this for a moment. You've worked hard, you've saved, you've bought a home in a quiet, manicured Florida neighborhood. It's the American dream, right? A piece of the world that is yours. In your community, you see flags for sports teams, for political candidates, for holidays. It's a normal part of life, a way for people to express who they are. Then you decide to fly one of your own. But yours is different. And suddenly, in the eyes of the people in power, you are the problem. This is exactly what happened to one man. An HOA, the governing body of his neighborhood, told him his flag was a nuisance and offensive. They ordered him, and only him, to take it down, even while dozens of his neighbors' flags flew without any problem at all. So that man, feeling targeted, isolated, and alone, decided to fight back. His fight, as important as it is not an isolated incident. It's a key part of a much larger storm, a legal firestorm that culminated in a landmark ruling against another HOA for what a court would hear was a years-long campaign of discriminatory harassment. That ruling powerfully reaffirmed a legal precedent that was always there, but often ignored, a precedent that homeowners everywhere can now use to challenge the kind of overreaching and discriminatory rules that turn the American dream into a suburban nightmare. This isn't just one family's story. It isn't even two family stories. This is the story of the law that could destroy your HOA's unchecked authority, and finally, begin to shift the balance of power back to you, the homeowner. For nearly 20 years, Antoine Mickle called the River Point community in Jacksonville, Florida his home. 20 years. Let that sink in. That's 2 decades of paying dues on time, of maintaining his property to the community's standards, of being a member in good standing. He wasn't a stranger or a newcomer. He was a fixture, a long-term resident who had invested in his community. And like in so many neighborhoods across the country, people there expressed themselves. They flew flags. Flags for their favorite sports teams, flags for political candidates, you name it, it was probably there. This kind of personal expression wasn't just tolerated, it was a part of the community's character. But when Mr. Mickle, a black man, decided to participate in this very same neighborhood tradition by flying a Black Lives Matter flag, his experience was suddenly, and starkly, different. It wasn't a matter of months or weeks of deliberation. Within days of him raising the flag, an official-looking envelope arrived. It was from his HOA. It was a violation notice. The letter was cold, bureaucratic, and absolute. It called his flag a nuisance and an offensive activity, demanding he remove it immediately. Think about those specific words. A nuisance. Offensive. Who gets to decide that? What one person finds offensive, another sees as a statement of fundamental human rights. The letter carried the implied threat of fines, liens, and worse, if he didn't comply. It was a clear message: your expression is not welcome here. Now, in the face of legal challenges, the HOA would later try to backtrack. They would attempt to reframe the issue, claiming that the problem wasn't the flag's message, but the way it was displayed, hung from the house itself instead of on a dedicated, freestanding flagpole. It was a technicality, they suggested. A neutral rule, applied fairly and equally to everyone. But a quick look around his own neighborhood told a completely different, and much more troubling, story. A walk down his street, a drive around the block, revealed the truth. Photos from Mickle's own federal lawsuit tell the story better than words ever could. There were other homes, many other homes, flying flags in the exact same way, hung from the house, not on a pole. There were thin blue line flags. There were Trump 2020 flags. There were college football flags. All hanging from houses, all clearly visible, and all, apparently, perfectly acceptable to the HOA. Not a single complaint had been filed against them. Not one other resident received a threatening letter. Only Mickle's flag was called out. Only his expression was deemed a nuisance. For him, this wasn't just a dispute over a flag, it was a pattern. He was being singled out, and he knew it. This wasn't the first time he felt like a target in his own neighborhood. He said that for 20 long years, he'd faced all kinds of strange, persistent harassment. There were bizarre complaints about his mulch, of all things. There were neighbors who would just stand in front of his yard and gawk at him, making him feel like an exhibit in a zoo. These are the kinds of incidents that, taken alone, might seem small, petty, almost insignificant. But woven together over 2 decades, they create a suffocating tapestry of hostility. They send a constant, unnerving message: you are being watched. You are different. You don't belong. He described the feeling as one of utter powerlessness, saying, "I felt lonely and just all by myself, that I couldn't do anything against this powerful force." And that's what an HOA can feel like: a powerful, faceless force with its own rules, its own lawyers, and what seems like its own unchecked authority to dictate your life. But this time was different. The flag, the letter, the blatant, undeniable hypocrisy, it was a line too far. He didn't back down. He didn't quietly take the flag down and accept the injustice. He did what so few homeowners have the courage, the resources, or the energy to do. He filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. He decided to turn the tables and put the HOA on trial. Antoine Michel's courageous fight against what he saw as blatant selective enforcement brings up a huge, painful question for millions of Americans. What can you really do when your HOA crosses that invisible line? When does enforcing the rules stop being about maintaining property values and start becoming a pattern of outright harassment and discrimination? His story isn't a one-off. It's not an anomaly. It is a battle being fought in quiet suburban communities everywhere, and it connects directly to a groundbreaking legal decision that gives a powerful weapon to every single homeowner in America. A decision that clarifies your rights in a way that can no longer be ignored. The case is Watts v. Joggers Run Property Owners Association. Like Michel's story, it's also set in a Florida community. But this was no dispute over a flag or a minor rule. This was, according to the lawsuit, a years-long campaign of systemic racial discrimination. Sarah Watts, a black homeowner, experienced something far more insidious and relentless. And the ultimate bitter irony? She was a former board member of the very HOA she would eventually sue. She had been on the inside. She had seen how the sausage was made. She had tried to work within the system to create a fair community for everyone. But according to court documents, that very system was weaponized against her and her family. This wasn't about a misplaced garbage can or grass that was half an inch too high. This was a relentless, soul-crushing campaign of targeted harassment that made them feel like prisoners in their own home. The lawsuit alleges a shocking and persistent pattern of behavior. The HOA selectively enforced parking and pet rules against her family, while completely ignoring similar infractions from non-black residents. Imagine getting a violation notice for your car being parked an inch over a line, while your neighbor's guests have been taking up 3 spots for a week with no consequences. They were also allegedly denied access to common areas they paid for with their dues, like the community basketball court. Imagine having to explain to your children why they can't play in a park that their friends are using freely, right in front of them. It's a calculated act of exclusion and humiliation. The hostility wasn't just in the silent, bureaucratic enforcement, but in the open, ugly rhetoric. The association's president was accused of referring to black people as monkeys. Another director allegedly made other derogatory, racist comments. And when Sarah Watts, a board member herself, tried to use her voice, tried to speak at meetings to address these issues, she was systematically shut down. She was cut off after exactly 3 minutes, while non-black owners were allowed to speak without the same arbitrary restriction. It was a public silencing, a raw demonstration of power designed to tell her, and everyone watching, that her voice, her concerns, and her rights did not matter. The environment got so relentlessly hostile, so toxic, that Sarah Watts and her family felt they had no other option. The constant pressure, the public shaming, the feeling of being under siege in their own home, it worked. They did what the harassment was clearly designed to make them do. They sold their home and left. They were driven out. When Sarah Watts took her HOA to court, she didn't sue over a simple breach of contract or a violation of the community bylaws. She and her family went for the nuclear option. They sued them under the heaviest artillery in American civil rights law, the Fair Housing Act and the Civil Rights Act. These are landmark federal laws, born from the hardest-fought battles of the civil rights movement, designed specifically to stop discrimination in housing and ensure equal treatment for all Americans. But the HOA came back with a defense that can only be described as truly stunning in its audacity. They didn't just deny the allegations. They claimed the Fair Housing Act, the very law designed to prevent housing discrimination, didn't even apply to her. Their reasoning was this: they argued that the law only prohibits discrimination during the sale, or rental of a property. In their view, the powerful protections of the Fair Housing Act vanished the second the ink was dry on the deed. Since Sarah Watts already owned her home, they basically argued they were free to discriminate against her, harass her, and interfere with the enjoyment of that property all they wanted, with no federal consequences. Let the chilling absurdity of that argument sink in for a moment. It's like a store saying they can't legally refuse to sell you a television because of your race, but the second your credit card clears, they have every right to follow you out to the parking lot, harass you, and prevent you from ever actually watching what you just bought. It's like a school being forced by law to admit students of all backgrounds, but then claiming the right to segregate the playground, the cafeteria, and the classrooms once those students are enrolled. It was a legal argument that sought to create a loophole in our nation's civil rights laws big enough to drive a truck through. It proposed a world where you had the right to buy a home, but not the right to live in it peacefully, free from discrimination. And the most shocking part? The lower district court actually agreed with the HOA at first. The court bought their argument and threw her case out. For a moment, it seemed this nightmarish legal theory, this get-out-of-jail-free card for discriminatory HOAs, would actually stand. But Sarah Watts did not give up. She appealed. She took her fight to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the most influential federal courts in the country. And in April 2025, the appellate court delivered a verdict that sent shockwaves through the world of HOAs and community associations. The court completely, utterly, and emphatically rejected the HOA's argument. In a decisive ruling, the judges made it clear, the protections of the Fair Housing Act do not end the moment you sign the deed. The court clarified that the law absolutely applies to discriminatory conduct that happens after you move in. They affirmed that actions like denying or limiting access to community amenities, engaging in selective and discriminatory rule enforcement, and creating a hostile housing environment are all illegal under federal anti-discrimination laws. This ruling is a powerful, resounding confirmation that your HOA is not a kingdom unto itself. It is not a private club that is above the law. And it cannot hide behind its own petty rules and Byzantine regulations to engage in discrimination. This isn't just a win for Sarah Watts. It's a win for every homeowner. If you have ever felt targeted, singled out, or harassed by your HOA board, your story matters. It is part of this larger story. Share your experience in the comments below. You will be amazed at how many others have gone through the same thing, and your story might give someone else the courage to take action. Reading through them, you'll realize you are not alone. And to stay armed with the latest information on protecting your rights as a homeowner, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for this channel. So, what does the What's v. Joggers Run precedent really mean for you, a homeowner living under an HOA, in practical, everyday terms? It means you have a powerful legal shield, reaffirmed and clarified by a federal appellate court. This isn't just a local ordinance, or a state-level rule that can be easily changed. It's a major interpretation of federal civil rights law that has influence nationwide. First, and most fundamentally, it punctures the myth that HOAs can do whatever they want after you move in. The ruling makes it crystal clear that interfering with your right to use and enjoy your property through discriminatory action is illegal. This directly applies to the kind of selective enforcement we saw in Antoine Mickel's case. If your HOA consistently fines you for leaving your garbage cans out an hour too long, but your neighbors do it all the time without consequence, and you believe this difference in treatment is because of your race, your religion, your national origin, your family status, or another protected characteristic, you may now have a much stronger claim under the Fair Housing Act. Document everything. Take photos. Keep a log. This ruling gives you the legal foundation to challenge that behavior. Second, the ruling clarifies that this protection covers way more than just fines and violation notices. The court specifically recognized that denying or limiting access to community facilities, things you pay for with your dues, can be a form of illegal discrimination. This includes actions like locking a basketball court to target certain families, changing the pool rules in a way that disproportionately affects a specific group of residents, or blocking your access to a community clubhouse for a meeting. These amenities are part of the privileges of owning your home, part of the bundle of rights you purchased, and they cannot be discriminatorily withheld. Third, and perhaps most importantly, this ruling powerfully validates claims of a hostile housing environment. This is a crucial concept. Your home is supposed to be your sanctuary. It's your place of peace and security. If an HOA board, its managers, or its agents create an atmosphere of intimidation, humiliation, and harassment so severe and pervasive that it makes you want to leave your own home. As Sarah Watts felt forced to do, the law is now more clearly on your side. The Watts decision strengthens every homeowner's ability to hold their HOA accountable not just for its written rules, but for the real-world environment its actions create. This powerful legal shift from the courts is happening at the same time that more and more state legislatures are finally starting to listen to homeowners and are beginning to rein in the wild west of HOA power. In Colorado, a law now prohibits HOAs from banning most signs and flags based on their message or content. They can only set reasonable, content-neutral rules for things like size and placement. This is a direct legislative fix for the very problem Antoine Mickle faced, preventing the kind of message-based discrimination he experienced. In Florida, new legislation, HB 1203, now sharply limits an HOA's ability to fine residents for petty, harassing issues, like leaving garbage cans out for less than 24 hours around pickup time or leaving up holiday decorations for a short period after the holiday. This directly targets the death by 1,000 cuts strategy of using minor fines to harass and pressure residents. And in California, a new law, AB 130, now caps most HOA fines at just $100 per violation, preventing the outrageous, spiraling financial penalties that have pushed so many families into debt and even foreclosure over minor disputes like landscaping or paint colors. The message is clear, from the federal courts to the state houses: the tide is turning. The era of unchecked HOA power is beginning to face serious challenges. A fight that started over one man's simple flag and another family's desperate search for peace in their own home has ended up reinforcing the fundamental rights of millions of American homeowners. The precedent so clearly clarified in the Watts v. Joggers Run case is a declaration that the Civil Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act don't stop at the gates of your planned community. Their protections follow you all the way to your front door and inside your home. An HOA is a housing provider, period. And it cannot operate like a petty kingdom, immune to our country's most fundamental principles of fairness and equality. It is subject to the same laws as every other housing provider in the United States, from the biggest apartment landlord to the smallest rental company. For decades, the system has been tilted. The balance of power has been overwhelmingly in favor of the board, with its lawyers, its management companies, and its immense power to fine, place liens on your property, and even foreclose on your home. Now, that balance is finally, slowly, starting to shift back to where it belongs, with you, the homeowner. You have rights. Your neighbors have rights. And thanks to the bravery and persistence of homeowners like Antoine Mickle and Sarah Watts, you also have a powerful, reaffirmed legal precedent to help you defend them. If this video armed you with new knowledge, share it. Send it to a friend or a family member who lives in an HOA. Post it in a community group. The most potent weapon an overreaching HOA possesses is the belief among homeowners that they are isolated, powerless, and that resistance is futile. Let every homeowner know that when an association overreaches, when it discriminates, and when it harasses, the law can be both their sword and their shield.